So I want to get into macronutrients now. So first one, everyone always talks about, obviously, protein.
Yeah.
Big thing. Now,
You know what though? I gotta say this to you. I didn't understand it.
which part?
Protein,
Oh, yeah.
carbs.
Yeah.
I thought it was food. See, this is where this is where it gets really confusing, right? Like I had an uncle that was pretty athletic, and he said he used to make peanut butter and honey sandwiches. He'd come to our house and just make them and just eat them like crazy. Because in spaghetti, he would say the same thing. He goes, "You eat this stuff, it sticks to you, man. It sticks to you. It gets you." Well, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It sticks to you, all right. It makes you fat.
Yeah.
But we never went through our house. I didn't know I didn't know what protein was. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
We just we ate what we ate, and we didn't have quality food at the house because we didn't have a lot of money. So oblivious. So as I played hockey, I didn't even know that a steak was good for me. I didn't know.
Right.
And you might say, "Well, what are you like? You need a helmet when you live?" But no, I didn't know.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of people that don't know that. So to understand, like, protein is your number one. The reason it's actually protein means number one source. That's what protein means. Like the word protein.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what it means. It means number one. It's your number one source. It's the building blocks of life. So if it's the building blocks of life, that's actually kind of common sense. Right? You should eat a lot of that.
Yep.
Right? But protein is what builds your muscle. Right?
It builds your everything.
Builds everything, yeah. Builds everything. Amino acids, energy. It gives you your energy and all that shit too.
Yeah. So I didn't know this until, same like you. I didn't start learning about this till I was like 20.
Yeah, till I started reading.
Yeah.
And going,
same.
oh,
exactly.
I shouldn't have had spaghetti.
Yeah. And
20 times a week.
And it's not very difficult to understand. So like we're under the category of macronutrients now. So I said at the start, macronutrients. You got your three big ones: protein, carbs, fats. So protein, I'm going to start because that's probably the most significant one that we're going to talk about here. So macronutrients are the three big categories. You need a lot of it to sustain yourself. And then remember, the micronutrients are layered underneath that. So within your protein, carb, and fat sources, you'll get your micronutrients layered in there, right? Yeah. So as you just said, proteins for building muscle. So it doesn't matter what they're composed of, but they're composed of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. Proteins are the building blocks of everything else for the most part. And most commonly going to be found in animal products. That's where you're going to get protein. That doesn't mean you can't get it from a plant product. Beans. You can. Yeah. Beans. Peas actually is probably my favorite one.
Yeah.
But most meat or animal sources are going to have high levels of protein.
Yeah.
So,
eggs.
Yeah.
No,
eggs,
so protein. One of the things that Charles Poliquin I got from him is that if protein it used to have eyes, or became from something that used to have a set of eyeballs.
That's good.
Or used to run, or used to swim, or used to fly.
Yep. Yeah, that's good rule of thumb. So
donuts don't fly.
That's right. They don't
run,
fly.
or have eyes.
But like you said, it's the most important thing for everything, basically. So just a couple of quick little stats on protein that you can keep in mind. So 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. So for every 1 gram of protein that you eat, you're going to get 4 calories out of that. So the amount of energy that you're going to liberate from the protein is equivalent to 4 calories. So 4 measurements of energy is 1 gram of protein. So like you said, common sources, if you go with if it could fly, if it could run, if it could swim, that's a good rule of thumb. So any kind of beef, fish, seafood, eggs, nuts and seeds sometimes, Greek yogurt, yeah, cottage cheese, yeah, any kind of cheese really that comes from an animal. And then there's like whey protein powders also from animals. All this stuff is from animals, right? So keep that in mind. For training purposes and just for life in general, what should be recommended, and I think the actual recommendations, if you look on like whatever medical website you want, I think it under recommends what you should be having for protein. But you should be somewhere between 0.8 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. So what I tell people, just to keep it simple, is a gram per pound. So if you're 200 pounds, you should be having around 200 grams of protein every day. Yeah. That's kind of what your measuring stick is. So that's a simple way to do that. So if you're thinking, holy crap, how much is 200 grams of protein? That means you don't eat enough protein. So you should make an effort without having to measure, because you can measure if you want to, but without having to measure, start eating more protein, because it's very unlikely, if you've never heard this information before, that you're eating enough protein during the day. So make sure that you're trying to hit that 1 gram per pound. If you're training, if you're trying to grow, then there's some like argument about you should have more than 1 gram or whatever, but that's not
closer to 2.
Yeah, but that's not that necessary for right now. Keep as a rule of thumb, 1 gram per pound. That's an easy way to remember it, right? So that's protein. that's a non-negotiable piece of every meal. You need to have protein at every meal, especially when you're an athlete. You have to be hitting protein at every meal. So that could be in a powder, that could be in a cheese or a yogurt type thing, or it could be meat, eggs, whatever. At every meal, you need to be having protein. It's very important, and it's not even just for athletes; it's just for humans.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you're a mom and dad and you don't think about that, if you just have butter pasta for dinner one night, that is not good enough.
That's right.
So you need to have the protein at every meal, and there's a ton of reasons for that.
Yeah.
Has to do with hormones, has to do with satiety, it has to do with all kinds of stuff, building blocks for your body, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. I'm gonna do carbs last. Next one is fats. So fats are 9 calories per gram. So we said for protein it's 4 grams per calorie. Fat is 9 grams per calorie. This is why fat feels like it fills you up for a long time, because it's a lot more dense of a nutrient source. So this ends up being a reserve energy in the body. So because it's 9 calories per gram, your body won't go to fat first to burn because it takes longer to break down. Yeah. So it's going to look for quicker sources, which are like sugars, stuff like that, which we'll get into in a second. So reasons you need fat is because it helps you absorb vitamins and different micronutrients, which is important. Then there's different types of fat, which isn't super significant for right now, but there's saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, trans fat. So saturated fats it's too complicated, doesn't really matter, but just for your information, saturated fats are normally going to be solid at room temperature. So that's going to be, if you have a cut of meat, red meat in particular, if the fat's solid if it's sitting on the counter before you cook it. Yeah. Butter, solid.
Coconut oil.
Yeah, coconut oil. Poly and monounsaturated fats, those are going to be like olive oils, certain nuts and seeds, avocados, stuff like that. Then you have trans fats, which are basically, that's the no-go zone for fats, because that's stuff you're going to get when you have like fried foods, frozen foods, packaged foods, that kind of stuff. So that should be pretty basic for fat. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, but so when you say dumb it down, it's just there's a lot of big words.
Yeah.
So like if we were to dumb it down, would it be safe to say that your healthy fats that you could not necessarily worry too much about would be in your meat?
Yeah, meat.
Would be in your oils.
Yep.
Not vegetable oil. It's like your olive oils, your avocados, but like good oils.
Yeah, good oils. Yeah.
And some nuts, and like coconut oil.
Yep.
Those are your good fats. You get them in some cheese.
Yep. Oils, nuts. I would say oils, nuts, seeds, meat.
Yeah. So
animal products.
Yeah. So to keep it simple, to go back, you've got your protein comes from most meats. You get it from other places, but meats are hockey players. We eat meat.
Yep.
The second source is fats. So there's some of the fats are going to be in your meat, but you don't be afraid to cook with olive oil, butter, and have some nuts. Not crazy, but have some, and it's going to be healthy.
Yep.
And so the important thing with that is that this is why when we talk about whole foods, this is why it's so important, because like you said, the packaged foods that you get, cookies,
frozen pizza shit.
Yeah, cheese that isn't cheese, all this stuff. Look at trans fats, and that's the stuff that kills you. That's the stuff that's not actually food. Mm-hmm. So that's the stuff that's why it's so important to stay away from those packaged things.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing too is we'll touch on this again later. It's not about being perfect and you can never eat a pizza. It's okay. No. But this is just we're trying to give you a framework that you start as a base, and then and
eat most of the time.
And then if you choose to have something that isn't optimal, like it's okay, man. But if your base isn't good, if you don't have a good foundation, then those things start to become a problem. Yeah. So for the fats, it slows your digestion down because again, it's a more dense source of nutrients. Again, 9 calories for 1 gram. And it's essential for like hormone production, cell growth, all these types of body functions that you have, hair, like skin, all this kind of skin, all this kind of stuff, right? So the 2 macronutrients that are actually essential are fats and protein. You have to have that. You cannot skip out on those, or your body's going to feel the effects. It might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but down the line over time, you're going to be in a worse position than you would be if you keep those things in your diet. Yeah. So for fat intake, it ends up, nobody's going to measure this, but 0.3 to 0.4 grams per pound is a recommendation you can follow if you're interested in tracking it. So that's your fats. So now we'll go to the carbs. So the carbs are tricky now, right? The carbs are tricky because people use the word carb and they don't know what it means. So what I find a lot of times is people talk about carbs and what they mean is processed and packaged foods. That's what they mean when they say carbs, but they don't know what they're saying. So,
and several times it's a negative term.
That's right. And it's not. And especially as athletes, especially, and as humans in general, because our body runs mainly off of glucose, which is a sugar, which comes from carbohydrates. That's what our bodies run on.
Yeah.
But it's essential as athletes. Carbs are what fuel your performance. This documented research, if you want to perform optimally when we're talking about like high intensity bouts of work, which is what most sports are, you need to have that as a source of fuel. So you shouldn't be trying to leave out carbs because your mom said so, or because you heard it on a diet show or whatever, right? So carbs are not the enemy. They're not the enemy. So the funny thing about carbs is that like everything's a carb, right? Because carb is just sugar. It's just chains of sugar. That's what carbs are.
Yep.
And everything is a carb, except until you get it into like the very like lean cuts of meat that have nothing else on them at all. But anything outside of that, like, so you have any kind of sugars, any kind of starches, any kind of fibers, fruits, grains, vegetables, milk products, all this stuff has carbs in it, everything.
Yep.
So people also confuse the two words carbs and sugar.
Yep.
So they'll think, well, like I don't eat sugar. And it's like, well, everything's sugar. What do you mean you don't eat sugar? You eat sugar.
Natural sugar in an apple.
That's right. So, and people don't know that. So it's not what I think they mean when they say stuff like that is like processed, extra added sugar, white sugar. That's what they mean. But everything is sugar and you need it. So like I was just saying, it's fuel for everything. Everything goes first fuel source comes from carbs. That's what it comes from. So it's more of a fast burning fuel source, and it's back to, again, 4 calories per gram. So this is stuff that you're going to have that digests super quick for the most part. When you start to eat carb sources that have fiber attached to it, fiber slows digestion down, which is like vegetables. Vegetables mostly have a lot of fiber attached to it.
Yeah.
And that will slow your digestion down. But if you're having fast sugars, like a Gatorade, for example, where it's basically just sugar, it's not any kind of complex carbohydrate, meaning things attached together, not just one type of sugar, then you're going to digest that quick. And this is why when you're playing a game, that's what's recommended. You take things that digest quick so it's not sitting in your stomach, right? But there's different kinds. So if you eat a potato, for example, that has a lot of fiber attached to it, that's going to digest a lot slower. It's going to make you feel like you're full, versus you have a liquid Gatorade that zips through your stomach like that, because it's already digested for you. It's coming in as a liquid. It's just sugar. There's nothing else attached to it, and you absorb it fast, right? There's no digestion that it takes to get rid of that. So that's the carbohydrate thing. You need to make sure that you have adequate carbs especially as an athlete, when you're training. You need to make sure that you have enough carbs to fuel what you're doing. Now, where it starts to get tricky is that as athletes, especially because we're constantly stressed and tired, it's very easy to overeat carbs. So when they give you the pregame meal and it's a all-you-can-eat pasta dish, if you are pounding 2 plates of pasta 4 hours before your game, you're going to want to take a nap, and then you're done. You're not going to be able to perform after that. So the carbs are tricky. People think you need to like carb load before you go into your game and stuff, and you don't have to do that. If you're eating balanced in the days leading up to it, then you have enough carbs. You're going to be okay.